You're about to watch a video that I did with Clyne, aka the Eastern European Baddie Hunter, aka Clyne. New Europe experience on YouTube. This is a guy who spent the last 10 years traveling around the world, in particular in the last 5 years around Eastern Europe. He's interviewed a lot of men and women about the culture, the dating life, the lifestyle, and most importantly, he's been around looking for where the most beautiful women are. The cities with the best ratios, the cities with the most models per capita, the cities where men have the least competition. It's all in this interview. Now, I gotta warn you, Connor is a pretty straightforward guy, and this interview went in the direction where it got pretty intense. He tells it like it is. So because it was so raw, so in your face, I had to cut the video into 2 parts, one for public consumption and another one for members only, because if that stuff was public, I'd probably get canceled.
I'll ask you a question. Which cities in Europe have the highest proportion of women compared to men between the ages of 20 and 35?
Moscow, Minsk, and Budapest.
No, not even close. So number 1 is actually, which shocks everybody. Number 2 city is, number 3 city is, and I think Warsaw is in the top 5 cities that I go to with my clients as alternatives to Ukraine. Yeah, are you going to be discriminated against? This client also complained about all the Changs showing up in the region.
Connor, welcome. I've watched your YouTube for years, but for those of my viewers that don't know you, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Thanks for the invitation today. I'm speaking to you from Odessa on the shores of the Black Sea in Ukraine. I'm originally from Ireland, and I've been living in this part of the world for over a decade primarily. So when I say this part of the world, I've actually rebranded things in the last couple of years with the Russo-Ukrainian war. Help my clients with living the dream lifestyles in a region that I refer to as New Europe, and basically it's the countries in between Germany and Russia. So we're talking about a lot of countries in between. So a lot of Central Europe, Southeast Europe, countries like, if I look at that general definition, it would be like Poland, countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Czechia, Serbia, Montenegro, Romania. So the countries are in between. So nothing as far west as, say, Germany, but nothing as far east as Belarus and Russia. But basically, I end up helping my clients with a select number of countries because I offer an in-person service, so it's not realistic that I'm in all these places all the time. And most of my clients were interested in going to here in Ukraine still, even that probably might surprise a few people, but there are guys who still want to come here. Romania, Moldova, Poland was very popular. Latvia in particular is popular, Estonia, Lithuania, and I also go to Kazakhstan.
The majority of my clients are guys in their late 20s, early 30s who work in tech, right? Because that's what I used to do. And they're just financially pretty well off, but they don't know how to talk to women. Is that the same for you, or do you have like a different type of clientele that reach out to you?
Definitely, it's high-level men is what I focus on. And the focus is not purely on dating or relationships. That's a significant component. Most guys who are interested in moving to this region from, say, North America or Western Europe or even parts of Asia, they normally are either single or they actually have a partner from this region already. That's why they're thinking of coming here.
Are most of your clients looking to move there, or are there clients who are like, hey, I want to go there and date for a few months and then go back to my own country? Like, what's that like?
Most of my clients definitely are not falling into category of just coming on a trip for, a weekend or staying a month or two and then planning to leave again for good. Not everybody plans to relocate 100% of the time. I would say it's somewhere in between. They want to come regularly and they want those contacts here in general, and they're looking to improve their life overall. And dating is definitely a big draw for this region, in particular if you're a single guy living in, we'll say, the collective West or a different part of the collective West, because all the countries that I deal with are also obviously part of the European Union and NATO. And so it's evolved. I would say that nowadays, definitely the majority are interested in spending a lot of time in this region. They're not just coming to on a weekend or a month trip just to find a wife or something like that and then export her back to the home country. You have a few guys who maybe still think like that, and it's always hard for me to judge exactly who watches my content overall, because I only meet a certain small subsection in person. So I would say the in-person clients, that has evolved from guys that were coming just to maybe pick up some chicks, maybe look for a wife, to actually wanting to live here. And a lot of my original clients from 2019 particularly, they ended up moving to the region, in particular during COVID. And so that's also why the business evolved. Immigration law, a different type of law, but because I have a legal background, I have a good sense of what needs to be done on those issues and have a lot of local context and spending a lot of time here that I value. So
yeah, it's totally different problem, right? When you want to live there long term, you have to look at your visa options, which country you're from, and how to actually make that move smoothly. Yeah, 10, 20 years ago, we saw this documentary of like old, like blue collar white guys from the States, like mail order briding them to America. This was like in the 90s. That doesn't happen anymore, right?
I think it's still marketed. I think you're talking about the mail order bride. I'll put that in inverted commas because no one's actually been ordered online. I mean, these guys actually had to come and meet the women. So it's always been a bit of a misnomer, but the wife hunter stereotype coming here, that is a lot less. However, those guys are still marketed to. There's been a bit of an evolution with this war in Ukraine that it's not entirely completely vanished here in Ukraine, but it's dramatically reduced, and a lot of those agencies now, they just pitch other countries. I mean, I looked at what their websites, and they went from 80-90% talking about Ukraine to now talking about it 10% of the time. The market has dropped. I think also that's more a marketing thing. I don't think those guys are having much success for probably the last 10 years, and I think a lot of them are just getting scammed, to be frank. If I've talked to guys who've gone on these trips before, and sometimes I'll give you an example. One guy was a consultant client who now is about to get married. He actually invited me to his wedding in Ukraine here. He went on some sort of tour like this. It would have been, I think, at least 7 years ago at this point, because we're now 2025, so we'll say around then. And he went on a tour with a guy who looks definitely on the more honest side of the industry. And he told me there was over 20 guys on his tour, and not one of them met any women from the tour that they had a relationship with. And out of those 25, we'll count him now because he's about to get married to a Ukrainian woman like 7 years later with absolutely nothing to do with the original tour. But he said one other guy stayed on and got a local girlfriend, but it was nothing to do with the actual tour in the sense. He just lived there for a few months, and then another guy ended up marrying a Russian, so kind of in the region. But the rest of them, they even gave up in the entire region eventually. They just went to other parts of the world, or they met someone back home. So socioeconomic difference, the economic difference had definitely changed a lot. In the early 90s here in Ukraine or Russia, Moldova, even into Central Europe like Hungary and Czechia, former Yugoslavia, there was an economic collapse after the end of communism, and people were pretty desperate, and you couldn't travel very easily. It was very hard if you were a woman, unmarried, 20 years of age, and you wanted to go and live in Germany back in the day. Getting a visa would have been a nightmare. I mean, even remember, I used to have a Romanian teacher. This is like probably 10 years ago, and she had a Canadian boyfriend. It was the same kind of stereotype. She really struggled to get a visa because she's unmarried, early 20s, and the Canadians are just coming from a country they considered poor, right? Even though Romania today, 10 years later, isn't that poor. Just ticking all the boxes for someone who would overstay their visa if they gave it to her. She even got rejected. And guys, back in the 90s, yes, I think it worked. You didn't have the internet wasn't as interconnected in terms of social media or dating apps. I mean, how were you going to find, a woman in Odessa, before, even if you showed up here, linguistic skills were a lot lower in terms of level of English. I know that's something you also wanted to talk about. So back then I can see they were matching people that didn't have any other opportunity to meet each other, and there was a big imbalance socioeconomic. The women wanted to leave, and, the guy, he basically got a more attractive woman than back home. I think that was the main trade-off.
Yeah. So when I think about Ukraine, the travel advisory says like it's very dangerous, Ukraine and Moscow, right? But are you saying that these guys, they don't care? They're so like, it's not that dangerous. They're going to go anyway. Yeah,
I did a live stream last week on my YouTube channel, and in preparation for it, I went into ChatGPT, as everyone does nowadays, because it's a good way of collating a lot of information. I was like, okay, what is the probability of being killed or injured in a Russian attack per day, per capita, in a city like Odessa, Kiev, or just the country in general? And it came out to about 1 in a million on any given day. Obviously, you live here during the entire, this phase of the war. It's been over 1,000 days. I mean, then you got to fight. But if you're coming for, say, 100 days, the statistical risk is not very high. And then you compared it to what are the chances of being in a victim of a violent crime in a major US city on any given day per capita, and it's like 20 times higher. Here, you don't have to worry about being robbed so much or anything like that. There's martial law. So basically, it's a situation where there are police almost everywhere. Even when I was walking down here to start the interview, there were lots of soldiers and guys in uniform. There's very little petty crime here. I think the bigger issue, if you're going to come to Ukraine now, is the psychological impact. You have to be prepared for air raid sirens. I watched a lot of vlogs from other content creators who've come here, and it made me think back to the beginning of 2022 and the invasion. I evacuated for a few weeks and then came back. And the first time I had been here, and there was air alerts, and you're waiting, what am I going to do? Am I going to sleep out in the corridor? But you get used to it very quickly, and you make a more calculated assessment what the threat level is. So I think it's more the psychological impact, like maybe having to go to a shelter. Where I live, I can see the anti-aircraft fire strafing across the skyline. It's like fireworks everywhere. It's very loud. So if there's a major drone attack, then I'm not going to sleep. So I have to go down to the basement. It's fine. I have internet. I just kind of scroll there. I talk to my neighbors. It's kind of a good way to get to know everybody in your building even. Ironically, maybe, I made a joke in the last live stream that I had when I used to work as a lawyer, there was one of the partners, he'd met his wife on a train going from East to West Berlin or the other way around. And, we had this kind of romantic story about it, Cold War, a meeting on the train. I was thinking, yeah, maybe I'm going to meet my future wife or long-term partner in an air shelter in Odessa during the war, because you have a lot of time to get to know people. So you will not even be allowed near the front. The dangerous cities, the Ukrainian military are not even going to allow you to go to. So it's more about just random acts of violence by Russia that target civilians, or they accidentally hit the wrong thing, or the missile got shut down, you get hit by debris. But it's very low probability on a daily basis per capita.
If I was a potential client, I would say, the neighboring countries are also very good. Why don't I go there? Because there's no risk whatsoever. And the dating market is also still very good, right?
Yeah, there are some differences in terms of, say, the price level. And here in Ukraine I know that was one of the things you would ask me about, where is good price-wise in the region, because the currency dropped a bit. We're just looking at your daily costs. So for example, I just came with my coffee. Normally I have a flat white. It's a pretty good item for me to judge the price levels across the country. It's a bit more of a luxury. I drink like high-end coffee. And here in Odessa, I pay around €2 to €2.10. So we're talking dollars, maybe 2.20 to 2.40. But if I go to neighboring Moldova, Chisinau, I pay $3.35 to $3.85. So we'll say over $3.50, right? So that's already a big increase in price. That's almost 50%. And if I go to Warsaw, I know Warsaw, a lot of content creators say, oh, it's super cheap, but this is like, maybe 10 years ago it was, but now I pay almost all the time over €4 for my flat white there, maybe 4.20 to about I even paid 4.70. So that's like, almost $5. So if you compare it to being here, it's like double the price for something like that. Things like getting an apartment in the city center, an Airbnb, it's like half the price of even Chisinau. It's going to be less than half the price of Warsaw. Long-term rent the same way. It's probably a third of Warsaw, because of the number of people moved there, also with not just this war, but also neighboring Belarus with the political oppression. A lot of Belarusians moved, plus Warsaw has grown exponentially economically. So it's just a huge hub. A lot of people are moving from around the world to live there. So they didn't build enough housing for this population increase. So the prices have gone up. Warsaw's overrun by single guys. There aren't that many foreigners around. Here in Odessa during the summer, we'll say up until summer 2021, you just had so many foreign guys coming here chasing girls. It was like, I used to kind of make fun of it, the hordes of horny foreigners that would like line the streets chasing the girls. But now you don't have that, right? So for my local friends here, or my friends who are Ukrainian, and the foreigners here, they're normally businessmen who have business interests, who are single. They said it's probably the best time ever for them dating in Ukraine. Right? A lot of girls are coming back from having lived in the European Union for maybe 3 years. Their level of English improved, their level of French, German, whatever it was. They're maybe a bit more open-minded to dating a foreigner as well. So, if you go to Warsaw, you're going to pay a lot more. And if you're only interested in the dating side, unless you're really exceptionally high value, straight out of the traps, then I think you're going to really struggle. So you got to weigh up, what's best for you.
And it sounds like you're paying a danger premium, or the opposite of a premium, because it's more dangerous. The rents are lower, the costs are cheaper. So there's an advantage to go there if you can handle some of the stress of the country being under, that situation. I got to ask you this, because in preparation for this, I did some research, and I did, the street views on YouTube where a person walks with a camera, and I researched every single city that you talked about in your videos. Here's my conclusion. I spent like a late night on it, but the street view, in terms of the quality of the women, nothing beats Moscow. Nothing I saw beats Moscow. Now, I don't know if that's because just those videos or clips are available, but the Moscow girls are just stunning.
I've been to Moscow many years ago. I also went to St. Petersburg in 2019. I was also in a city called Kaliningrad one time as well. Moscow is the biggest city in Europe, we'll say continental Europe. So if you go to the nicest, richest area, well, guess what? As you're already aware, a lot of the prettiest, wealthiest girls are going to go and hang out there. So you do have that little bit of effect that it's a huge city. And if you go to the most chic area of the city, then there's going to be a lot of beautiful women. That's clear. Compared to other places, compared to walking down the street in central Warsaw, yeah, it's a lot smaller city. So is there going to be the same kind of glamorous, beautiful women? Not really. But then again, to give an example, because in my feed for some reason, recently, I get a lot of these videos about rich guys and girls in Monaco. And if you were to just look at their walk around videos around the casino in Monaco, well, most women look like a top model, or they're extremely wealthy and well put together, right? So YouTubers who talk about dating who went to Moscow, and they seem to have given up. So I was a bit surprised, to be frank. I mean, you also have to look at people who, if someone is living in Russia and making a vlog on a regular basis, they're basically not going to say anything negative about the country. I did have another client who speaks Russian and went there, and he also told me that he found the women materialistic, and they weren't so interested in him compared to when he got to other places in the region. So I was a bit surprised. I also like Vilnius during the day. I don't like the nightlife there, but during the day it's pretty cool to walk around. There's a lot of beautiful women. I think that in terms of models per population is number 3. It's less than Estonia, but Lithuania is like models per capita is number 3, and number 5 is actually Latvia. So you also should look at the demographics. I'll ask you a question. Which cities in Europe have the highest proportion of women compared to men between the ages of 20 and 35?
Moscow, Minsk, and Budapest.
No, not even close. So number 1 is actually London, which shocks everybody because most of these guys online who are hanging out in London complain about the dating scene. But proportionally, you definitely have the best ratio. Number 2 city is Riga. Number 3 city is Vilnius. And I think Warsaw is in the top 5, and in Tallinn as well. It's basically the cities that I go to with my clients as alternatives to Ukraine, with the exception of Chisinau. They have the best ratio. So women aged between 20 and 35, which is what I guess the age demographic that your clientele is interested in, my clientele is interested in. There are way more women than men. So a lot of times when people try to do, I guess, sensationalist videos, they'll look at the entire age demographic for the country and say, oh, they have no women in, I don't know, pick country, insert country, Belarus, but like if you take out people aged over 40, there's actually maybe even more men in the country. I think London, by the way, at the top end is pretty amazing. To the average, no, but there's a lot of beautiful women come from all over Europe who have great style. It's one of the fashion cities of Europe. So just depends where you're socializing and what your status is in London. I always had a great time there. I met amazing women, so I'm not going to complain about London, but I never lived there.
I heard Riga, Lithuania. I guess you're assuming Vilnius in Lithuania?
Yeah, there's a second city. Like Vilnius is or Lithuania is a country. It doesn't just have the capital. It also has Kaunas. It's a city that's a bit smaller, but also reasonably big. The capital of Vilnius is a lot more cosmopolitan. It has different minorities, Polish, Ukrainian, Russian speaking as well. So it's kind of a more mixed city. I remember at the best place, I know this is not what you asked about because it's obviously later nightlife, but at the best club there, which is quite small, the face control does not let tourists in, which is also another thing that's quite common in some parts of the region. The most exclusive place, they don't want tourists. You can be a foreigner, but if you show up at the door and don't speak to them in Lithuanian, they're not going to let you in. So I knew this before I went there, so I just said hello in Lithuanian, and apparently that was enough that they just assumed. And I went in, right? But I didn't hear any other language. There were definitely no tourists.
What about Minsk in Belarus?
Yeah, it's tragic what's happened in the last over 5 years in Belarus. When I started this channel, I filmed a lot in Minsk and in Belarus. I have amazing memories from there. I like to say that I lived during the golden era of like being a single guy in Minsk because there was great nightlife. It was pretty open. There weren't so many tourists coming in at the time. It was really a phenomenal period to be there. And I think definitely for meeting women and getting intimate, it was definitely with beautiful women is the best city that I've been to ever during that period. So we're talking about like 2018, 2019. The last time I went was very early in 2020. But with this clampdown by Lukashenko after the elections in August 2020, just so many of the more dynamic, open-minded people, successful people, they left the country. They've had massive brain drain. It's very easy for Belarusians to emigrate to Poland and to Lithuania. And Lukashenko basically drove out most of the people who ran the bars, the clubs. He drove out a lot of those, maybe not entirely all of them. But when I look at the kind of, well, we're talking from a dating point of view, the kind of woman that would be interested in dating a foreigner, so probably speaks some English, is a bit more open-minded, they didn't stay in Belarus. Definitely after university. Normally, if they go to university, they have got to work for the state for 2 years, quite often in Belarus. So a lot of girls, by the time they're 24, they're gone. They don't live in Belarus anymore. And now a lot of them, they even leave earlier. They get sent to university abroad. So it's pretty sad. I would say the best of Belarus has left. I have talked to guys who've been there since 2020. They complained about the nightlife being really poor compared to before, a lot of gold digging. And also one guy who told me that, yeah, he had a bit of foreigner factor because there was just almost no tourists or foreigners hanging out there. But then he didn't speak Russian or obviously Belarusian. So he said he couldn't communicate. And I was like, that doesn't surprise me. The girls who speak English, why would they stay in Belarus in 2025? This is a country with very little future at the moment. So it's interesting also with YouTube, a lot of the YouTubers who stayed, who presumably support what was going on, they've recently started to leave.
For me, I think one of the reasons I'm in Thailand right now because it's such a close flight to my parents who are getting much older. And I like the Eastern European look. And I think that it would be great to find someone there who wants to maybe move out of the country. What are the degrees of openness for the girl to move out of country? Because I know it's hard to leave your hometown. At the same time, I could always go back to the States, or I have citizenship here in Asia. So I'm like, are these girls open to it? If I went there and dated for a few months and to find a wife, perhaps, would they be open to leaving the country, or is that very hard to do?
Yeah, there's a little bit of bias. Like if you don't speak any local language, you clearly look different. Either you're maybe Black or Asian, for example. And who are you going to attract? You're probably not going to attract the girls that plan to stay long term. Maybe some of them have a fetish. I hang around these places a lot. I have local contacts. I speak many of the local languages. The girls who are probably going to want to hang out more, they're not planning to necessarily leave. They just think, okay, he's part of the crew. So it's a little bit hard for me to say how many of them are open to immigration. I think not as many as is portrayed online, for sure. There's not much foreigner factor being an American in Warsaw. And I don't think too many girls from Warsaw dream of living in America. Maybe if they met you here, they'd be like, okay, my ticket out of Odessa, I like Asian culture, I like American culture. So there's definitely no stampede to go live in a place like the US in 2025 compared to before.
That's so interesting. So you might not know the answer to this question, because even for me in my early 30s, at my peak modeling in America, there's always this like closet racism there, right, that I had to overcome. And I've heard that it's less in Europe, but I wonder what your opinion is. And the reason I asked that, let me give you context. I think my SMV value is decently high in the States back at my peak. I'm definitely aging out at 41, but I was able to date like some pretty amazing girls, right? And now, because my family's in Taiwan, I haven't been back in like 20 years, and they come back, I'm like, oh my God, everything's so new and everyone's doing really well. It's like kind of reverse immigration from the US because it's so expensive over there and it's getting worse. I'm thinking if I'm an Asian guy in Eastern Europe and I'm generally seriously looking for someone there and I have long-term plans, whether it's moving out of the country or maybe just finding someone first and having a discussion together as partners, right? Would I face racism or kind of a barrier when it comes to European girls?
If you show up in Poland and you're a Polish guy, or you have Polish descent and speak some Polish, and that's going to be way more attractive than being an Asian guy, for example. Unless the girl is really into K-pop. Of course, you have niches. Some girls just like black guys because they're attracted. It's a bit of a fetish. So, although most of the Asian guys, because there's so many Asian guys now in Warsaw, one client I had, he had been in Poland over a decade ago, and I think he just completely ran amok being an Asian guy because there were so few. He was in Wrocław, and then he came back in obviously early 2020s and realized, oh, I'm not that special, and there's like lots of competition here, right? Yeah, are you going to be discriminated against? Definitely there's kind of a hierarchy overall. If we look at society, I think probably still in certain parts, maybe being Western European is still seen as a little bit higher status, but not because there's so many.
Are there a lot of good looking Asian guys now, like there in Europe?
Yes. I've seen guys who should be modeling who are Asian guys walking around with, like, I just remember once I was out in Vilnius and there were two Asian guys, tall, good looking, and they were with some local girls, also very good looking. Yeah, there are a lot there. This client also complained about all the Changs showing up in the region. So he's not insulated from that. Just to go back to maybe the ethnicity thing, I think there's definitely going to be, I'm making a bit of assumption. I need to get stats, but I think if you're very clearly look Middle Eastern and are Muslim or are African and the girls are not into that niche, then I think there would be, a bit of discrimination. They just wouldn't be there. There would be a societal minus. Yeah, you can play it to your advantage as well. If you have a niche that you can focus on. But I think overall, being from the region is an advantage. I would say overall, if you take the two guys, right, we look exactly the same with the same amount of money, same fitness, social status. I think it's better to be from the region. Unless you speak the local language, then maybe you have a little bit of a flavor because, oh, I'm the Irish guy, I'm born in Ireland, or I'm Irish-British by nationality. And then I hang out on Odessa, I'm in these social circles, and I speak the languages.
In part 2, we get really deep into the specifics of which city you should go to depending on your income level, which city you should go to if you're Asian or a minority, whether there's discrimination against different types of guys, why this one country is actually quite dangerous to go to, and all the beautiful women who are really intelligent have already left. And it's not one of the countries that's currently fighting.
I was asked recently in live stream, okay, Connor, where do you recommend going? It's basically the question you asked, right? As a single guy, where'd you go? And I said, just purely on dating, I go to, I just prefer natural beauty. So model level beauty, I made a lot of it in a lot of it in, I'd rather sit here in Odessa and take my chances with a Russian drone, some kamikaze drone than some of the girls you obviously meet and they say, Connor, my biggest problem, I don't have any friends. I don't have any guy friends. This was his biggest struggle. So say day game, I know that beforehand you wanted to talk about this scandal in Warsaw that's brewing over there. One thing that stuck out, they met almost no girls doing this. As you said, they suck at it, first of all. There's going to be a vigilante problem at some point, I predict. Here, there's violence against guys who go around doing day game in the center. Man, it's cringe. It's just like, why don't you get a coffee and sit beside him? At least look normal. I'm just like, you think coming off the street like a beggar Because the only other people come up to them are beggars looking for money. But I fear that there's going to be some incident outside that train station where there's a lot of tension in Poland. There are groups that are quite bigoted that don't appreciate foreigners being there.
Australia has the opposite problem. It has what they call chatflation. It's because there are a lot of very good-looking guys, the weather is great, and a lot of blue-collar guys who are just really in shape.
Very rare that women are overweight, and if they're under 30, if they're under 40 in this week, almost all women say slim here was like shocking. It was like a stereotype. They were like supersized. And this is something that intimidates a lot of guys who I talk to.